My name is Sarah, and I'm from Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Millbrook's one of those towns you don't really end up in unless you're already from there. It's in the western part of the state, not far from the Ohio border. And we've got about 3,000 people if you count the folks who only come back for Christmas. I moved back here 2 years ago, after my divorce. Rented a little 2-bedroom house on Oak Street that my aunt used to own. It's got a front porch that needs paint and a back door that sticks in the humidity. But the rent's cheap, and the neighbors mostly keep to themselves. Mostly, the thing about this house is it sits right across the street from Oak Grove Cemetery. Not a big one, maybe 2 acres. It's fenced in with black iron gates that have been there since the 1800s. The stones are all tilted and covered in moss, and the grass is always a little too long. But it's peaceful. That's what I told Claire when she moved in last. March. She'd lost her job in Pittsburgh and needed a place to crash for a while. I told her it was quiet. I told her the view was actually kind of nice. At least the neighbors are quiet, she said the first night, cracking a smile as we unloaded her boxers. She was trying to make me feel better about the whole situation. Claire's my younger sister. She's always been good at that. I work from home. Medical transcription. I sit at my desk in the front room, the one that faces the cemetery, and I type up doctor's notes all day. It's steady work. It pays the bills, and it means I don't have to talk to many people, which suits me just fine these days. I get up around 7, make coffee, and sit down at my desk by 8. The cemetery's just part of the view. I watch Mr. Harlan, the groundskeeper, ride his mower around the paths. He's maybe 70, wears the same olive green jumpsuit every day, and he always waves when he sees me. Sometimes joggers cut through on the gravel path that loops around. Sometimes there's a funeral, but not often. Mostly, it's just quiet. Claire got a job at the diner in town. She works the lunch shift, so she's gone most of the day. We settled into a routine pretty quick. She'd come home smelling like coffee and fry oil. I'd have dinner going. And we'd eat together and watch whatever was on. TV, it was nice. Normal. She stopped joking about the cemetery after the first week. Just accepted it as part of the scenery. The first thing I noticed was the gate. It was a Tuesday morning in early May. I'd just sat down with my coffee when I saw it, the main gate. The one that's supposed to stay locked was standing open. Not wide, just a foot or so. Enough that you could slip through without touching it. I figured Mr. Harlan had forgotten to close it. He's getting older. It happens. But then it was open again on Wednesday and Thursday. Always the same amount. Always in the morning. I started checking it before I went to bed just to see. I'd look out around 10 and it would be closed. The chain looped through the bars the way it's supposed to be. Then in the morning, there it was again. Open. I mentioned it to Claire one night at dinner. "You sure you're not just forgetting?" she asked, passing me the salt. "I'm sure," I said. "I check it." "Maybe it's the wind," she said. "There's no wind at 10 at night. And that gate's heavy." She shrugged. "Maybe Mr. Harlan's checking it late. Old people get weird schedules." That made sense. I let it go. A week later, I saw the flowers. They were white lilies. It's the kind you get at the grocery store, wrapped in that clear plastic with the rubber band. Someone had placed them on a grave near the back, one of the really old ones. The stone was so worn you could barely read the name anymore. I only knew it was there because I'd looked it up once. Hannah Greer died 1874, age 23. No one visited Hannah Greer. I'd been watching this cemetery for 2 years. I would have noticed maybe it's an anniversary, Claire said when I pointed them out. Not likely. She died in September. It's May. Maybe someone's doing a genealogy thing. Maybe, I said. But I didn't think so. The next day there were more lilies. On 3 graves this time, all old. All in a row, right along the back fence. They looked fresh, like they'd just been put there that morning. I watched for Mr. Harlan, but his mower was silent. I didn't see him all week. I started getting up earlier, just to look. I'd be at my desk by 6:30, coffee in hand, watching the cemetery through the window. The flowers kept appearing, always in the morning, Always on those same graves, Claire noticed me watching. "You're getting obsessed," she said. "I'm just curious." "To cemetery, Sarah. People leave flowers." "Not here," I said. "Not on these graves." She gave me that sister look, the one that says she's humoring me. "All right, but maybe you should get out more. Talk to actual living people." I didn't tell her about the motion light. We've got one of those sensor lights on the side of the house, the kind that clicks on when something moves. It's supposed to catch raccoons or whatever. But it started clicking on at night, just once, around 2 in the morning. I'd be in bed and I'd see the glow through my curtains. The first few times, I figured it was a deer. We get those. Or a stray dog. But it kept happening. Same time, every night. And I started listening harder, trying to hear something. Anything. There was never any sound. Just the click of the light, the faint hum of it, then the click as it turned off again. One night I got up and looked. I stood at my bedroom window, which faces the side yard, and I watched. The light was on, bright and yellow, pooling on the grass. There was nothing there. Just the grass, and the fence, and the cemetery beyond it. Then the light clicked off, and I was staring at my own reflection in the glass. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep much. The whispering started in June. I'd be working headphones on, typing up some doctor's dictation, and I'd hear it. A low sound, like wind through leaves, but rhythmic, like words. I'd take my headphones off, and it would stop. I'd put them back on, and there it was again. I checked my equipment. It wasn't a glitch. The audio files were clean. I started hearing it without the headphones too, just faintly. Always when I was alone in the house, I'd be making coffee, and I'd catch something. A name, maybe? It sounded like Claire, but that didn't make sense. Claire was at work. I asked her about it one night. "Do you hear weird noises in this house?" Like ... voices. She looked at me over her plate of spaghetti. "You mean like the TV?" "No, like whispers." She chewed for a minute. "No, but I'm not home as much as you. You sure you're not just listening too hard?" "Maybe," I said, but I knew I wasn't. The 4th of July came and went. Millbrook does a little fireworks display in the park, but you can barely see it from our house. Claire went with some friends from the diner. I stayed home. I was tired. I'd been sleeping badly, waking up at 2 every night when the motion light clicked on. I'd started leaving my bedroom curtains open just so I could see if anything was actually there. There never was. That night, though, I heard footsteps. They were on the gravel path in the cemetery. I could hear them clearly crunch, crunch, crunch steady, like someone walking a loop. I got up and went to the window. The cemetery was dark, just the faint glow of the moon on the stones. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear them. The footsteps stopped. Right at the edge of the cemetery, near the fence across from my house. Then they started again, but slower. And they were moving toward my house. I stood there, frozen, waiting to see someone climb the fence, waiting for a shape to appear in the streetlight. Nothing. Footsteps just ... stopped, like whoever it was had reached the edge of the grass and disappeared. I didn't sleep. At all that night, the next morning, I went outside. I checked the fence. No signs of anyone climbing it. No footprints in the street. I walked across the street and into the cemetery. The gate was open, like always. I went over to the graves with the lilies. There were more now. 5 of them. The flowers were fresh, the stems still wet. I heard a mower start up. Mr. Harlan was finally working again. I walked over to him. He saw me coming and shut off the engine. "Morning," he said. He didn't smile. "Morning. I've been meaning to ask, have you noticed anyone leaving flowers? On the old graves?" He looked at me for a long time. His eyes were watery, the way old people's eyes get. "You live across the street," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Sarah Mitchell. I've been there 2 years." He nodded slowly. "You hear things, see things." It wasn't a question either. I felt my stomach tighten. I yesed the gate, for one. "It keeps opening. Supposed to," he said. And the flowers? Someone's leaving flowers on graves that haven't had visitors in 100 years? They have visitors, he said. They have you. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Not leaving flowers. Not yet, he said. He started the mower again, and that was the end of the conversation. I went back to the house. Claire was just getting home. She took one look at my face and asked what was wrong. Nothing, I said. Just talk to Mr. Harlan. He's odd. He's 80, she said. They're all odd. But I couldn't shake what he'd said. Have you? That night, the motion light clicked on at 2 a.m. I was already awake. I went to the window, and this time I saw something. It was just a shape, darker spot in the darkness, standing at the edge of the light. It looked like a person, but I couldn't make out any features. It was just there. Then the light clicked off and it was gone. I told myself it was nothing. A shadow, a trick of the light. But the next morning, there were muddy footprints on my porch. They weren't big, it's just small smudges, like someone had walked up the steps and then back down. The mud was dark and wet, even though it hadn't rained in days. I touched it. It was cold. I called Clara out. Look at this, she frowned. That's weird. Maybe a dog? Dogs don't leave prints like that. Raccoon? Raccoons don't walk up porch steps and then leave. Ouch. I'll mention it to Mr. Harlan. Maybe there's a hole in the fence. But I knew there wasn't. The whispers got louder. Not louder exactly. Clearer. I could make out words now, Sarah. That was one and Claire. Always both names. Like someone was calling us. I'd be in the kitchen, and I'd hear it. And I'd go to the living room thinking Claire was home. But she wasn't. I started checking the locks. All of them. I'd never been like that before, Claire noticed. You're acting weird, she said one night. Like paranoid. Not paranoid, something's happening. It's an old house across from a cemetery. Of course weird stuff happens. It's in your head. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then the things started moving. Small things. And my coffee mug would be on the table, then it would be in the sink. I'd find my shoes by the door instead of in my room. Claire's keys would end up on the mantle. We both thought the other was doing it at first. Then we started keeping track. I didn't move your notebook, she said one morning. It was on the kitchen counter. I'd left it in my office. I didn't move your jacket, I said. It was hanging on the hook by the door. She'd left it on the chair. We stopped accusing each other. We just accepted it. Things moved. That was the new normal. I went to the town hall. Wanted to look up the cemetery records. See who was buried there. The clerk, Mrs. Hendricks, gave me a look when I asked. Why are you digging into that? She said. I just want to know. The history. She sighed and pulled out a big leather book. Records are incomplete. A lot of gaps, especially the 1870s. Fire in the church lost a lot of papers. I flipped through. There were pages missing. Whole sections just gone. I found the plot map, though. The graves with the lilies were all in a row. Section B, plots 12 through 17. The names were listed. Hannah Greer, 1874. Mary Greer, 1875. Infant Greer, unnamed, 1875. Sarah Greer, 1875. Claire Greer, 1875. My hands started shaking. Mrs. Hendricks. I said, who were the Greers? She looked at me. Don't know. No one's claimed them. Why? No reason, I said. I closed the book that night. I told Claire what I'd found. She was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She went still. Greer, she said. That's not our name, I know. But it's weird, right? The same names? It's a coincidence, is it? She looked at me. You're scaring me. I didn't know what to say to that. I was scaring myself. The motion light clicked on at 2 a.m. I didn't look. I already knew what I'd see. The footsteps started on the gravel path. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Then they stopped. Then they started again, on the street. Then on my lawn. Then on my porch steps. I heard the front door handle turn. I got up. I walked to the living room. The door was still locked. The chain was on, but the handle was wet, like someone had been holding it, their hands slick with something. I looked out the peephole. There was no one there. The next morning, there were flowers on my porch. White lilies. Just like the ones in the cemetery. Claire found them. She picked them up, frowning. Where'd these come from? I don't know, I said. She looked at me. Then she looked at the cemetery. Sarah, we need to talk. We sat down at the kitchen table. She put the flowers between us. I've been hearing things, she said. Voices. When I'm in the shower, when I'm in my room, I thought it was just, I don't know, stress, but it's not. Saying my name. I nodded. Mine too. And things keep moving. At that light. And the footprints. She paused. I think we need to leave. And go where? Anywhere. This place is wrong. But I knew we couldn't. I don't know how I knew, but I did. This house was the only thing keeping whatever was out there from coming all the way in. I went to see Mr. Harlan again. I found him by the Greer plots. The lilies were fresh. You know, I said. You know what's happening? He leaned on his shovel. I told you. They have visitors. Why us? You're Mitchell's, aren't you? Yes. Mitchell was the name they took. After, when they moved away. To forget. After what? He pointed at the stones. The Greers all died in 75. Cholera. Took the whole family. Father buried them. Then he sold the house to a cousin. Name was Mitchell. Same house you're in. I felt cold. The house was a parsonage. It was the father was the minister. He buried his own wife, his own children. Then he left. But they didn't. What do you mean they didn't? He looked at the house. They're waiting for their family to come home. The gate opens for them. The flowers are for them. The footsteps. That's them walking home. They've been walking home for 150 years. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell him he was crazy, but I'd seen the footprints. I'd heard the footsteps. They're not ghosts, he said, like he could read my mind. They're just patterns. The house remembers them. The ground remembers them. Now you're there with their names. Sarah Claire. It's close enough. It's calling you home. I went back to the house. Claire was packing. We're leaving, she said. Now, today I sat down. We can't. What do you mean we can't? The house? It's not done with us. She stared at me. You're talking crazy. Maybe, I said. But the flowers are still coming. The footsteps are still coming. And now they're inside. She stopped packing. What do you mean, inside? I pointed to the living room, the mug on the table, the keys on the mantel, the muddy footprints that had appeared on the hardwood floor that morning, leading from the front door to my office. She saw them. Her face went white. I didn't put those there, I said. I know, she whispered. That night, we both stayed up, sat in the living room with all the lights on. Motion light clicked on at 2 a.m. We heard the footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Then the street, then the lawn, then the porch. The front door handle turned. The chain lock rattled. Then it stopped. We didn't move, just sat there holding our breath. In the morning, the lilies were on our kitchen table. 5 of them. It's perfectly arranged in a glass of water. Claire looked at them. She didn't say anything. She just started crying. I went to my office. My transcription work was waiting. I put on my headphones. I pressed play. The doctor's voice started talking then. Underneath it, another voice. A whisper. Sarah, it said. Claire, come home. I took the headphones off. The whisper kept going. It was coming from the wall, from the floor, on the air. I went downstairs. Claire was standing by the window looking at the cemetery. The gate's open, she said. I know. It's been open all night. I know. She turned to me. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. We tried leaving. We packed the car. But when we got to the end of the driveway, Claire looked at me and said, I can't. I physically can't make myself pull out. I knew what she meant. My foot was on the brake, and it wouldn't move to the gas. We sat there for 10 minutes. Then we went back inside. The house felt different, like it was holding its breath. I found the family Bible that afternoon. It was in a box in the attic, left over from when my aunt lived here. I'd never opened it before. Inside, on the first page, was the family record. But it wasn't my family's record. It was the Greers. Hannah, Mary, Sarah, Claire, all the same dates. And underneath, in different ink, sold to James Mitchell, 1876. May this house find peace it never did. Mr. Harlan stopped coming around. His mower sat silent in the cemetery shed. The grass grew tall. The lilies kept coming. Every morning, fresh ones. The motion light stopped clicking on. It just stayed on all night now, like it was expecting something. The whispers got clearer. They weren't just saying our names anymore. They were saying, "You're home. You're home. You're home." Claire started sleepwalking. I'd find her standing by the window at 3 a.m., staring at the cemetery. She'd say, "They're waiting for us to come to bed." I'd lead her back to her room. In the morning, she wouldn't remember. I stopped working. I couldn't concentrate. I'd sit at my desk and watch the cemetery, waiting for the flowers to appear. They always did. One morning, there were 7 lilies. 7. One for each of us, I guess. The Greers and the Mitchells. The past and the present. All mixed up, I went across the street. I walked to the Greer plot. The stones were all clean now, like someone had been washing them. The lilies were arranged in a perfect line, and there was a new stone. It wasn't there before. I know it was. It was small, temporary, like the ones they put up while they're waiting for the real. One to be carved, it said, Mitchell, in loving memory, no dates. Just the name. I touched it. It was warm. I went back to the house. Claire was in the kitchen, setting the table. She'd set 3 places. "Claire," I said, "there's only 2 of us." She looked at the table. "Oh," she said, "I guess I just... I felt like there should be 3. I didn't ask who the 3rd was for." That night, the footsteps didn't stop at the door. They came inside. I heard them on the stairs. Slow, deliberate. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Like they were still walking on gravel. I got up. I stood at my bedroom door. I listened. They stopped outside Claire's room. Then I heard her voice. But it wasn't her voice. It was younger, softer. "Come to bed," it said. "It's time to come home." I opened her door. She was asleep, but she was sitting up in bed. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't seeing me. "Claire," I whispered. She turned her head. She smiled. "We've been waiting," she said. "The house is finally full again." I closed the door. I went back to my room. I locked the door. I know locks don't mean anything anymore, but I did it anyway. In the morning, Claire was fine. She didn't remember. She asked why I looked so tired. I didn't tell her. I went to the town hall again. Mrs. Hendricks wasn't there. The door was locked. There was a sign on it, closed for renovations. But the building looked exactly the same. I walked home. The gate was open. The lilies were fresh. The grass was tall enough to hide anything. I keep the porch light on now. All night. Every night. I don't know why. It doesn't keep anything out. Claire still sets 3 places at dinner. She doesn't notice. I don't correct her. The transcription company called yesterday. They said I missed a deadline. I told them I'd get to it. I haven't turned on my computer in a week. The whispers are constant now. They don't wait for night. They're always there, just under the sound of the wind. It's behind the hum of the fridge. Sometimes I answer, sometimes I say, "I'm home," and the house seems to settle when I do. Like it's been waiting for me to say it. Claire asked me yesterday if I ever think about leaving Millbrook. I told her no. I told her, this is where we belong. She nodded. She understood. We don't talk about the cemetery anymore. We don't talk about the flowers or the footsteps or the 3rd place at the table. We just live here. Day by day, waiting. I still keep the porch light on, facing the stones. Claire hasn't mentioned the extra place setting at dinner. I don't ask. My name's Claire, and I'm from Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Millbrook's one of those towns that just kind of sits there, you know? Not sad, not happy, just settled. It's about 40 minutes north of Harrisburg, but it might as well be 100 years away. The highway bypassed us back in the 70s, so everything just ... stayed. Main Street still got the brick buildings with the old tin awnings, and the post office shares a wall with the only diner that still opens at 6 for the farmers. There's a Dollar General out by the old cannery, but most folks still shop at Yoder's Market if they can. It's that kind of place. I moved back here last August. Not because I wanted to, really. My mom got sick, she's better now, but for a while there it was touch and go. Someone needed to be close. My older brother lives in Denver with his kids. My sister's in Seattle, so I was the obvious choice. I work from home, doing medical billing for a clinic in Philadelphia. All I need is internet and a phone. The rent in Millbrook is about a third of what I was paying in Baltimore, so it made sense on paper. That's what I kept telling myself. It made sense. Sarah moved in with me 2 months later. She's not family, just someone I knew from college who fell on hard times. Her restaurant closed, her lease was up, and she needed a place to crash while she figured things out. I had the spare room. It was supposed to be temporary. That was 8 months ago now. Works out, though. She pays half the rent, and she's quiet. Keeps to herself. Works over at the elementary school as a teacher's aide, so she's gone most of the day. We get along fine. We're not best friends or anything, but we've got a rhythm. She makes coffee in the morning, I make tea at night. We split the grocery bill. It's comfortable. The house is a rental. A 2-story colonial that's seen better days. But the heat works, and the roof doesn't leak, which is more than you can say for most places in my price range. It's on Oak Street, which runs parallel to Main, 1 block over. The whole street's just 6 houses, all rentals now. Old mill families used to own them, back when the textile factory was still running. Now it's mostly people like me, transplants, or folks who never left but wish they could. The landlord's a guy named Dale who lives in Florida. I've never met him. He sends me texts when the rent's due. That's the extent of our relationship. The thing about the house, the thing I didn't think much about when I signed the lease, is that it sits directly across from Oak Grove Cemetery. Not across the street. Across the yard, there's maybe 20 feet of weedy grass between my front porch and the iron fence that circles the place. The fence is black, ornate, the kind you see in old photographs. It's got a gate that squeaks. I noticed that the first day I moved in, squeaked something awful. The landlord said he'd oil it. He never did. But the cemetery itself? At first, it was actually nice, peaceful. Oak groves, small, maybe 2 acres tops. It's old. The oldest stones date back to the 1840s, when Millbrook was just a crossroads with a mill. The trees are huge, these ancient oaks that keep it shady even in summer. The grass is always a little too long. The town maintains it, but they're not exactly meticulous about it. There's a guy who mows every other week, but the edges stay ragged. The dandelions have taken over. It's not creepy, though. At least, it wasn't. It just looks ... forgotten. Like a lot of things around here, I'd sit on the porch in the mornings with my coffee and look out at it. The sun would come through the trees and hit the stones in patches. You could see the names. Most of them were the same families: Millers, Stoltz, Fuse, a few English names like Baker and Clark. Generations of the same people, buried in rows. There's a section for infants near the back. Tiny stones with lambs on them. That part's sad, but not scary. It's just history. Small town history. Sarah used to joke about it. She'd say, "At least we know the neighbors are quiet." She'd laugh. I'd laugh. It was a joke. That's all. My routine was simple. I'd wake up at 6:30, make coffee, sit on the porch until 7:15. Then I'd go inside, log into the clinic's system, and start processing claims. It's mindless work mostly. Matching codes to procedures, sending them off to insurance companies, following up on denials. I'd take a break at noon, eat a sandwich, sometimes walk through the cemetery. It's a good loop down to the back corner, around the far side, back to the gate. It takes about 15 minutes. I'd look at the stones, read the dates, wonder about the people. Like I said, it was peaceful. The air smells different there, like old leaves and dirt and something else I can't place. Incense? Maybe, but that doesn't make sense. There's no church attached. Just the cemetery. Sarah would get home around 4. She'd usually have papers to grade or lessons to plan. We'd make dinner together some nights. Or we'd just heat up leftovers and eat in front of the TV. We'd talk about our days, but not much. Her kids were mostly well-behaved. My claims were mostly denied. That was the level of our drama. Sometimes we'd hear the train from the freight line that runs along the river, 3 miles off. It'd blow its horn at night, a long, low sound that carried. Sarah said it made her feel lonely. I said it made me feel like I was somewhere real. We agreed to disagree. The town itself is quiet. On weeknights, everything closes by 8. The diner stays open till 9 on Fridays, but that's it. You get used to the silence. It's not empty, though. You can hear dogs barking, the occasional car on Main, the wind in the trees. In summer, the cicadas are so loud you can't think. In winter, it's just the wind. You learn the sounds. You learn what belongs. Mr. Hendricks lives next door. He's in his 80s, maybe older. He's lived in that house his whole life. He's the one who told me about the cemetery when I first moved in. Not the history. Just little things. He said, "You'll get used to the gate." It's always done that. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just kept watering his tomatoes. He's got a garden that runs along the fence line. He's out there every morning, even when it's hot. He doesn't talk much. When he does, it's usually about the weather or the deer eating his hostas. He never mentioned the cemetery again after that first day. Not until later. The first thing that really happened, was in late September. It was one of those nights where the temperature drops fast after sunset. I was inside, working late. The clinic had a backlog from a system upgrade, and I was trying to clear it before the weekend. Sarah had gone to bed around 10. The house was quiet. Just my keyboard and the hum of the fridge. Around 11:30, I heard the gate squeak. That's normal. It does that. But then it squeaked again, and again, like someone was opening it and letting it swing shut. Not fast, slow, deliberate. I looked out the window, but the porch light only reaches so far, and the cemetery's dark. The trees blocked the moon. I couldn't see anything. I figured it was a deer. They get in there sometimes, or a raccoon. Something pushing against the gate. I went back to work, but the squeaking kept going. Same rhythm. Open, close. Open, close. For maybe 10 minutes, then it stopped. Just stopped. I heard the grass rustle. Then nothing. I told myself it was the wind. There wasn't much wind, but there was some. Enough. The next morning I checked. The gate was closed. Locked even. It's got one of those old latches that drops into place. You have to lift it to open it. I stood there for a minute, looking at it. The grass around it was pressed down, but that could have been from the mowing guy. I didn't think much of it. I had a lot of claims to get through, Sarah noticed before I did. She's more observant that way. About a week after the gate thing, she asked me at dinner if I'd been putting flowers on the graves. I said no, why would I? She said she'd seen fresh flowers. White ones. Lilies, maybe. On a grave near the back? The stone was old, she said. 1887. A woman named Mary Stoltzfus. She'd noticed them because they looked so new. I told her maybe a relative still lived in the area. That happens. People remember. But she was right about the flowers. I saw them the next day on my walk. White lilies, tied with a ribbon. They looked like they'd come from a florist, not a grocery store. Fancy. They were leaning against Mary Stoltzfus's stone. I'd never noticed that grave before. It was small, simple. Mary Stoltzfus, beloved wife. 1842 to 1887. 45 years old. The stone had a carving of a rose on it, worn down by weather. I looked around. No one else there. Just me and the trees and the stones. The wind moved through the leaves, and for a second, I thought I heard something. A voice, but it was just the wind. It has to be the wind. There's no one else here. I went back to the house. Sarah was reading on the couch. I told her about the flowers. She didn't look up. She just said, "Huh, that was it." but she stopped walking in the cemetery after that. She said it made her feel like she was intruding. I didn't push it. Everyone's got their own sense of things. October came, and the leaves started turning. The cemetery got prettier, if that's possible. All that orange and yellow against the gray stones. I'd sit on the porch with a blanket and my tea, watching the light change. The gate kept squeaking at night. Always around 11:30. Sometimes I'd look out, but I never saw anything. I started leaving the porch light on. It made me feel better, even though it didn't really light up much. Mr. Hendricks noticed the light. He called over one morning while I was getting the mail. He said, "You're burning a lot of electricity." Said I didn't mind. He looked at the cemetery, then at me. He said that light won't help. Then he went back to his garden. I asked what he meant, but he just shook his head. He does that a lot. Shakes his head like he's disappointed in the soil. The motion light on the garage started acting up around mid-October. It's one of those cheap ones, solar-powered. It would flick on for no reason. I'd be inside, and I'd see the light spill across the driveway. The first few times, I figured it was a cat. We get strays. But it started happening more. 3-4 times a night. I'd look out and there'd be nothing. Just the dark. Sarah mentioned it one morning. She said, "Did you see the light last night?" It kept waking me up, said I'd check the settings. I never did. It didn't seem important. Things break. That's what things do. But then the light stopped working altogether. Just died. I figured the battery gave out. I was going to replace it, but I kept forgetting. It's on the list. The list of things I'll get to eventually. The first week of November, I found mud on the porch. Not a lot. Just a few smudges near the steps. It had rained the night before, so that made sense. Except the mud was only on my side of the porch. Sarah's side was clean. And it was that thick clay mud that we don't have in our yard. Our soil's more sandy. The cemetery, those that's got clay. I'd seen it when I walked. The back corner stays wet after rain. I cleaned it up. Didn't mention it to Sarah. She'd been jumpy lately. Waking up at night, checking the locks. She said she heard something in the walls. I told her it's an old house. It settles. She said it's not settling. It's scratching. I said I'd call an exterminator. I didn't. The scratching became a thing. I'd hear it too, sometimes. Not mice. Deeper, like something dragging against wood. I'd bang on the wall, and it would stop, then start again. Always on the side of the house that faces the cemetery. I told myself it was probably a raccoon in the crawl space. They get in there. Mr. Hendricks had to trap one last year. He told me about it. Said it made the same sound. I was working late one night, trying to finish a backlog of claims before Thanksgiving. The clinic was closed for the holiday, but the work doesn't stop. It just piles up. Sarah was asleep. The house was quiet. Then I heard the gate again. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Same rhythm. I looked at the clock. 11-30-2. Always around that time, I got up and went to the window. The porch light was on, but it barely reached the fence. I could see the gate, though. It was moving. Not much. Just a little swing. Like someone was pushing it, then letting it go. I watched for maybe 5 minutes. It just kept going. Same pace. No wind. The trees were still. I should have gone out there. I know that now. But I didn't. I just went back to my desk and turned on some music. Something about hearing your own heartbeat in the quiet. I didn't want to hear it. The next day I walked through the cemetery like usual. I went to the gate. The latch was up. Not locked. I always lock it. I'm sure I do. I've made a habit of it. But it was up. I dropped it down, heard it click. I looked around. The grass was pressed down in a line like someone had walked from the gate to the Stoltzfus grave. The lilies were still there. They hadn't wilted. That's when I noticed they weren't tied with a ribbon anymore. They were just placed there, neatly, like someone had arranged them. I stood at Mary Stoltzfus's grave for a while. I don't know why. I just felt like I should. The stone felt cold, even though the sun was out. I touched it. The carving of the rose was deeper than I remembered. almost new looking. But that's impossible. Stone doesn't change like that. When I got back to the house, Sarah was on the porch. She had that look. The one where she's chewing her lip. She does that when she's thinking too hard. She said, "Claire, when did you start talking to yourself?" I said, "I don't." She said, "I heard you last night. In the living room. You were saying a name?" I asked what name. She said she couldn't make it out. It was just a whisper. I told her she was dreaming. She said she wasn't. She'd gotten up to get water, and she heard me. Except I was in my office working. I wasn't in the living room. She looked at me for a long time. Then she went inside. She didn't say anything else. But that night, she locked her bedroom door. I heard the click. I started checking the cemetery records. There's a small historical society in town, run by a woman named Dorothy. She's in her 60s, maybe 70s. Always wears cardigans, even in summer. I went there on a Tuesday afternoon, said I was interested in the history of the area. She was happy to help. Too happy. No one comes in much, she said. I asked about Oak Grove. She pulled out a binder. It had maps, lists of burials, old photographs. The photographs were from the 1930s, mostly. The cemetery looked the same. Same trees, same fence. The gate was open in one of them. I pointed to it. I said, "Does that gate always stay open?" She looked at the photo. She said it's always been temperamental. That was her word. Temperamental. I asked about Mary Stoltzfus. She flipped through the binder. Found the page. Mary Stoltzfus, wife of Jacob, mother of 5. Died of consumption. Buried in 1887. There was a note in the margin, handwritten. Flowers maintained by family. I asked Dorothy what that meant. She said some graves have perpetual care, paid for by relatives. But she checked the ledger. No one had paid for Mary Stoltzfus's care. Not in 50 years. I asked about the flowers then. She looked at me. She had this way of looking at you like she's measuring something. She said, "You live across the street, don't you?" I said yes. She closed the binder. She said some graves have visitors we don't see. Then she asked if I needed anything else. I said no. I left. That night, the gate squeaked again. 11:30. I was ready for it. I'd turned off the porch light thinking maybe the dark would discourage ... whatever. But it kept squeaking. I went to the window. I watched. This time, I saw something. Not much. Just a shape near the fence. It was the height of a person, but it didn't move like a person. It was too still. Then it was gone. Just ... Not there anymore. I told myself it was shadows. The moon came out from behind a cloud, and I realized it was just a tree. One of the oaks. That's all. But I knew the trees. I'd looked at them every day for months. This was different, but I couldn't prove it. You can't prove a shadow. Sarah stopped sleeping. She'd be up when I went to bed, sitting in the kitchen with all the lights on. I'd ask her what was wrong. She'd say nothing. But her eyes were red. She'd been crying. I asked if it was about the house. She said it's not the house. It's the quiet. She said the quiet wasn't right. It was waiting. I didn't know what to say to that. I told her we could get a fan. White noise. She said it wasn't about noise. It was about the spaces in between. She said, when you live next to a cemetery, you learn what silence really is. And it's not empty. I wanted to tell her she was being dramatic, but I didn't, because I'd started feeling it too. That weight in the air, like the silence had texture. Like it was pressing back. The first week of December, we got a cold snap. Temperatures dropped into the teens. The wind picked up, and the trees in the cemetery started making this sound. Not the normal rustle. It was more like a sigh, like they were breathing out. I know that sounds crazy. I'm not saying they were. I'm saying that's what it sounded like. The gate squeaked more. Sometimes it would go for an hour. I'd lie in bed and listen to it. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. Pause. Always the same length between. Like a rhythm. I started timing it. 43 seconds between squeaks. I counted. I don't know why. It gave me something to do. I went outside one night. I had to. I couldn't just listen anymore. I put on my coat and boots and walked across the yard. The grass was frozen. It crunched under my feet. The porch light was on, but it didn't help much. It just made the dark beyond it seem darker. I got to the gate. It was closed, locked. It wasn't moving, but I could still hear it. Squeak, pause, squeak, pause. I stood right there, my hand on the iron, and I heard it. But the gate was still. The sound was coming from inside the cemetery, not the gate itself. The sound was moving away from me, deeper into the trees. I should have gone back inside. I know that. But I lifted the latch. It was cold, cold enough to sting. I opened the gate. It didn't squeak. Not a sound. I stepped inside. The ground was frozen hard. My breath made clouds. I walked toward the sound. It was coming from the back corner, near the infant graves. I could see the small stones, the lambs. The sound stopped when I got close. Just stopped. The silence that came after was worse. It was absolute. No wind. No trees, nothing. Then I heard my name. Clear as anything. Claire? Not loud, just ... said, like someone was standing right behind me. I turned. No one there. Just the stones and the trees in the dark. I went back inside. I didn't run. I walked. Fast, but I walked. I locked the door. I locked the deadbolt. I went to my room and closed the door. I didn't sleep. I just sat there listening. The gate didn't squeak again that night, but I heard something else. Footsteps on the porch, light, like someone was walking back and forth. Then they stopped. Right outside my window. I didn't look. I couldn't look. In the morning, Sarah was already up. She was in the kitchen, making coffee. She looked at me when I came in. She said, "You look terrible." Said I didn't sleep. She nodded. She said, "I heard you go out last night." I asked if she heard anything else. She said, "Just you and the gate." And then ... nothing.
What?
She poured me coffee. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about anything. We just drank our coffee and looked out the window at the cemetery. The sun was coming up, hitting the stones. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. But neither of us said that word, mister. Hendricks came over that afternoon. He knocked on the door, which he never does. He was holding a paper bag. He said, "I brought you some tomatoes." Last of the season. Took them. They were small, green at the tops. He stood on the porch, looking at the cemetery. He said, "You're staying inside more now." Not a question. A statement, I said. "It's getting cold." He said cold doesn't bother them. I asked who he meant. He looked at me. He had those old eyes that have seen too much of the same thing. He said, "The ones who don't rest. They don't feel cold." I didn't know what to say. I asked if he believed in ghosts. He laughed. It was a dry sound. He said, "Ghosts are stories we tell to make sense of what we can't fix. This isn't a story. This is just ... unfinished." He pointed to the cemetery. He said, "Those graves aren't what you think they are. They're not just markers. I don't know the word, anchors. They hold things down. Or they try to." I asked what they were holding down. He said, "The ones who weren't supposed to stay. The ones who got comfortable." He left after that. I watched him walk back to his house. He moved slow, like his bones hurt. I wanted to ask more, but I couldn't make my mouth work. I just stood there with the tomatoes. Sarah came home. I told her what he said. She listened, but she didn't react. She just went to her room. She didn't come out for dinner. I knocked. She said she wasn't hungry. I heard her packing a bag later. I asked what she was doing. She said, "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while. Just until ... She didn't finish. I didn't try to stop her. I wanted to. But I knew she needed to go. She left the next morning. She left her key on the kitchen table. She said, "You should leave too." I said I couldn't. My mom was here. My job, she said. There are other jobs. She didn't say anything else. Just got in her car and drove away. So now it's just me. And the house. And the cemetery, the gate still squeaks at 11:30. Every night, I've stopped looking out the window. I just listen. It's easier that way. But other things have started. The motion light on the garage started working again. It flickers on and off all night long, like someone's pacing in front of it. The scratching in the walls is louder. It's not just one wall anymore. It's all of them. It moves. I'll bang on the wall in the living room, and it'll stop. Then it'll start in the bedroom. Like it's following me. I found footprints last week. Inside the house. Not mud, just ... marks. Like someone had walked through dust. But I clean. I keep it clean. They were in the hallway leading from the front door to my office. Then back. I followed them. They stopped at the door. I checked the lock. It was unlocked. I never leave it unlocked. I know I don't. I lock it now. 3 times. I check the windows. I keep the porch light on, but I know it doesn't matter. The light doesn't reach where it needs to. I went to the Historical Society again. Dorothy wasn't there. A younger woman was. She said Dorothy was out sick. I asked about the cemetery records. She said they were being digitized. They weren't available. I asked about Mary Stoltzfus. She said she'd never heard that name. I described the grave. She said there was no Mary Stoltzfus in Oak Grove. She showed me the map. The spot I described was empty, unmarked. I went home and walked straight to the grave. It was there. The stone. The name. The lilies. They were still fresh. I touched the stone. It was warm. Like skin, I called the Historical Society. The young woman answered. I said, I'm standing at the grave right now. It's here. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Sir, our records show that plot is vacant. It has been for 100 years. I said, I'm not a sir. I'm a woman. She said, I'm sorry, but the record is clear. I hung up. I stood there. The sun was going down. The trees were making that sound again. The sighing. I started going through the old papers in the house. The landlord left a box in the basement. Old bills, letters, things from the previous tenants. I'd never looked through it. I brought it up to the kitchen table. I sorted through it. Electric bills from 1987. A letter from the town about water main work. A newspaper clipping about the mill closing. Then I found the photograph. It was black and white, curled at the edges. It showed the house. The same house. But the cemetery looked different. The gate was open. And there was a woman standing in the yard between the house and the fence. She was wearing a dress, long, dark. Her face was turned away. But her hair was pulled back, the way mine is. I turned the photo over. There was writing on the back. Oak Street, 1912, the Ross tenancy. My name is Claire Ross. My grandmother's family were Rosses, from Millbrook. I'd never made the connection. I'd never asked. I looked at the photo again. The woman. She was still turned away. But now I could see her hand. She was pointing toward the cemetery, toward a specific stone. I recognized it. Mary Stoltzfus. I put the photo down. I went to the window. It was dark now. The porch light was on. I could see the gate. It was open. Not just a little, all the way. And there was a shape. A person, standing just inside, not moving, just standing. I didn't look away. I couldn't. I watched, and then the shape moved. It walked toward the house. Not fast, just steady. It crossed the grass. I lost sight of it when it got to the edge of the porch light. But I heard the steps. On the porch, then the doorknob turned. I heard it, the knob turning, the door opening, the latch clicking shut. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside my office door. I saw the shadow under the door. A person's shadow. It didn't move. It just stood there. Then I heard my name, not whispered. Just said, normal, like someone calling me to dinner. Claire. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The shadow stayed. Then it moved away. Down the hall. I heard the front door open and close. Softly, like someone was being polite. I got up. I opened my office door. The hallway was empty. The front door was locked. I checked it 3 times. It was locked. I went back to the kitchen. The photo was still there, but the woman's face was turned toward the camera now. It was my face. Not similar, exactly the same eyes. The same mouth, the same everything, and she was smiling. Not a nice smile. Just a small one. Like she knew something I didn't. I called Mr. Hendricks. It was late. He answered on the 3rd ring. He sounded like he'd been awake. I said, Mr. Hendricks, it's Claire. I need to ask you something, he said. I know. I asked about the house. About the Rosses. He was quiet. Then he said they never left. That's the problem. They think it's still theirs. I asked what he meant. He said, the Ross woman who lived there in 1912, she wasn't supposed to be buried in Oak Grove. Her family had a plot in Harrisburg, but they brought her back. They said she wanted to be with her neighbors, the ones she'd watched from the porch. But she didn't just watch them, Claire. She kept watching, even after. I asked what she was watching for. He said, for someone to notice. For someone to see. You're seeing now, aren't you? I didn't answer. He hung up. I went to the basement. I found a box I hadn't seen before. It was behind the furnace. Old wood, splintered. I opened it. Inside was a dress. Long, dark wool. The kind from the photograph. And a pair of shoes. Black, small, my size. And a ring. A wedding band. Inside the band, it said Mary Stoltzfus Ross, 1887. I'd never seen these things before. They weren't here when I moved in. I know they weren't. I took the ring out. I held it. It was warm. I dropped it. It rolled across the floor and stopped at the base of the wall. The scratching started there. Right where the ring stopped. I left it. I went upstairs. I locked the basement door. I locked the front door. I locked my bedroom door. I sat on my bed. I listened. The gate squeaked. 11:30. Then I heard the footsteps on the porch. Then the front door opened. I heard the basement door unlock. I heard the steps coming up. They stopped outside my bedroom. The doorknob turned. It was locked. It rattled, gently, like someone was testing it. Then I heard a voice. My voice, but not mine. It said, "You're home. Good. We can finish now." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knob stopped turning. The shadow under the door stayed. Then it moved away. I heard the front door close. The gate squeaked. Then silence. The next morning, I went to the basement. The box was gone. The ring was gone. The dress was gone. The scratching had stopped. The motion light was off. The gate was locked. I went to the cemetery. The lilies were still on Mary Stoltzfus' grave. But now, there were 2 sets. One fresh, one wilted, and the stone had a new carving. Under the name it now said, "And Claire Ross 2025. I touched it. The carving was deep, new, but the stone was old. You can't carve new things on old stone and make it look old. You can't. I went back to the house. I called the landlord, Dale. I told him I needed to break the lease. He said, "I understand." He didn't ask why. He said, "I'll mail you the forms." He sounded relieved. I called my mom. I told her I was thinking of moving closer to her. She said that would be nice. She didn't ask why. She said, "You sound tired." I said I was. She said some houses are too full of old thoughts. You need a place with less history. I packed a bag, just the essentials. I'll come back for the rest later, or I won't. I'm not sure it matters. I locked the front door. I left the porch light on. I stood in the yard for a minute, looking at the cemetery. The sun was setting. The gate was closed. Everything looked peaceful. It always does. I got in my car. I started it. I looked back at the house. The window to my office was lit. I hadn't left the light on. And there was a shape. Just a shape. Standing there, watching. I didn't look away. I drove. I'm staying at a motel off the highway now. It's noisy. Trucks all night. People coming and going. It's perfect. I sleep with the TV on. But last night I turned it off. Just for a minute. And I heard it. The squeak. Not from outside. From the bathroom, like a hinge. Then my name. Claire. Just once. Quiet. Polite. I turned the TV back on. I didn't get up. I know better now. This morning, I found a photograph under my door. It's the same one from the house. The woman in the dress. But now, she's standing in the motel parking lot. Under the streetlight. And her face is turned toward the camera. It's my face. But her eyes are closed. And she's holding something. A lily white. I called the landlord again. I told him I left something important in the house. I needed to get it. He said, "The house is locked." I had someone change the locks. "For your safety?" asked who. He said, "The new tenant. She moved in yesterday. She said she'd been waiting a long time." Asked her name. She said to tell you she's home now. And she says, "Thank you for watching the place." I hung up. I looked at the photograph. The woman's eyes are open now, looking at me. She's smiling. The same small smile. And there's writing on the back. New writing. "The catalog is almost finished. You can rest soon." I don't know what catalog. I don't want to know. I keep the motel room door locked. I keep the bathroom light on. I don't look in mirrors after dark. I don't answer when I hear my name, but I know it's not over. Because the squeaking started again. Not from a gate. From the door, the motel door. It's 11:30. It always is. I still keep the porch light on, facing the stones. Not because I'm there, but because she is, and I think she likes it. I think she always did. My name is Tom, and I'm from Cedar Falls, Iowa. Well, just outside it, really. The town itself has about 40,000 people. But I grew up on the east side, where the neighborhoods start to thin out, and the cornfields take over. When I moved back last year, I didn't expect to end up living across from a cemetery. But that's just how things worked out. The rent was cheap, and the landlord didn't ask a lot of questions. He just handed me the keys and said, "It's quiet over there." Real quiet. At the time, I figured that was a selling point. I shared the place with my buddy Jake from college. We both ended up back in Iowa for different reasons. Me for a job at the Kopi, and because his dad got sick and he needed to stick around for a while. The house is one of those small 2-bedroom ranches built in the 60s. With aluminum siding that's supposed to look like wood and windows that rattle when the wind comes from the west. It's on County Road D, right where the pavement turns to gravel, and across the street there's Oak Grove Cemetery. It's not a big cemetery. Maybe a couple hundred plots, most of them old. The newest headstone I can see from my porch is from 1989. The rest are older. Some of them so weathered you can't read the names anymore. Jake and I have a good system. He works nights at the 24-hour truck stop out by the highway, so he's usually leaving when I'm getting home. I work days at the feed supply store in town. We overlap for maybe an hour in the evenings, sometimes less. He'll be sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, still in his work shirt. And I'll come in with dust on my boots from unloading pallets all day. We'll talk about the Twins game, or whether the mower needs gas. Normal stuff? The cemetery almost never comes up, except when Jake makes jokes about it. He's got a dark sense of humor like that. First week we moved in, he hung a plastic skeleton on our mailbox and waited to see how long it would take me to notice. Took 3 days. The town Cedar Falls and the little unincorporated pockets. Round it feels like it's been here forever and doesn't see much reason to change. There's a Casey's General Store about 2 miles down the road, and beyond that, just farms. The neighbors on our side of the street are mostly older folks who've been in their houses for decades. Mrs. Gable lives next door. A widow who waters her flowers every morning at exactly 7, even when there's frost. She's the one who told me the cemetery used to be bigger. They had to move some of it, she said, and they widened the road back in '72. She was clipping her roses when she told me this, not looking at me, just snipping away. Some of those stones don't have anyone under them anymore, not officially. I asked her what that meant, but she just shook her head and went inside. That was the longest conversation we've had in 6 months. Most days, the cemetery is just part of the scenery. I see it when I leave for work in the morning, a quiet stretch of land with a few oak trees that are probably older than the graves. In the summer, the grass gets tall, and the city only mows it every couple of weeks. There are a few plastic flowers people have put out, but they're faded from the sun. The gate is this black iron thing that's always open, hanging on one hinge. It doesn't swing shut or anything, it just stays where you push it. I've never seen anyone visit. Not once in the year I've been here. My routine is pretty simple. I'm up at 6, out the door by 7. I drive the 10 miles into town, work until 5, sometimes 5:30 if we're busy. Spring and fall are the worst. Everyone needs seed or fertilizer or salt for their driveways. By the time I get home, the sun's starting to go down. I park in the gravel driveway, make something for dinner, and usually end up on the porch with a beer, if the weather's decent. From my chair, I can see the cemetery. The light hits the stones in a certain way around dusk, makes them look warm, almost golden. It's peaceful, honestly. Jake says it's creepy, but he's not home during the quiet hours. He doesn't see how still it gets. The first thing I noticed that was actually weird, was the gate. It was a Tuesday in early October. I'd gotten home around 5:15, and it was already getting dark. I was carrying groceries in from the car, and I happened to look across the street. The gate was closed. Not just pushed to, but actually latched. I stood there for a minute with a bag of groceries in my arms, trying to remember if I'd seen it closed before. I didn't think so. It was always open. But it had been windy that day, so I figured maybe someone from the city had come by and shut it. Safety thing, maybe. I mentioned it to Jake that night. He was getting ready for his shift, pulling on his jacket. Gate was closed, I said. First time I've seen it like that? He just shrugged. Maybe the wind slammed it. Maybe, I said. But I knew that gate. It was too heavy for the wind to just slam it. And the latch was rusted. You had to really push it down to get it to catch. The next morning, it was open again. Not just open, hanging exactly like it always did, at that same 45-degree angle. I looked at it while I scraped frost off my windshield. I told myself someone must have come by. City maintenance, maybe? Though I'd never seen a city truck out here. They didn't even mow regularly. Work was busy that day. We were getting in a shipment of winter rye, and I spent most of the morning on the forklift. Around noon, Mr. Hendricks came in. He's one of our regulars, owns about 200 acres out by the river. He was buying fencing wire, and we got to talking about the weather. Then, out of nowhere, he says, "You still living out by Oak Grove?" I said, "Yeah, I was." He nodded, slow. "My granddad's out there. Plot 47. I haven't been out to see him in years." He paused, like he was deciding whether to say something else. Place got a history, you know? Not bad, just ... old. I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and paid for his wire. As he was leaving, he said, "You keep an eye on that gate, Tom. It used to have a lock." Was it? No explanation. Just that it used to have a lock. The week after that, the motion light on my garage started acting up. It's one of those cheap ones you get at Menards. Screws into the socket over the garage door. It had never been sensitive before. You practically had to stand under it and wave your arms to get it to turn on. But suddenly it was coming on all the time. I'd be sitting in the living room watching TV, and I'd see the light flood the driveway. I'd look out, but there was nothing. No deer, no cats, nothing. Just the light blazing away at the dark. Jake noticed it too. He'd get home at 2 in the morning, and the light would be on. Your sensor's busted, he said. Probably a spider built a web over it. They do that. I got the ladder out on Saturday and checked. No spider. The sensor was clean. I adjusted the angle anyway, pointed it more toward the ground, less toward the road. That night, it stayed off. I figured I'd fixed it. Sunday morning, I was up early. I'd promised Mrs. Gable I'd help her move a piece of furniture. She's got no family around, and I don't mind helping. As I was walking across my yard, I saw something in the cemetery. Flowers. Fresh ones. Yellow mums, the kind you get at the grocery store, still in their plastic pot. They were sitting on a grave near the front, one of the older ones. The stone was so worn you couldn't make out the name, just the dates. 1873 to 1901. The flowers looked like they'd been placed there that morning. The dew was still on them. I didn't think much of it at the time. Someone's relative, I figured. People do that, drive out to old cemeteries, leave flowers for ancestors. I'd just never seen it happen before. Jake got home around noon that day. He's got Sundays off, so he'd been out fishing with his brother. He saw the flowers when he pulled in. Who died? He asked, nodding toward the cemetery. No one, I said. Just someone leaving flowers. He squinted at them. Huh, that's kind of weird. For a stranger to do that, it's not weird, I said. People do that, maybe Jake said. But he kept looking at them while he unloaded his tackle box. That night, the motion light came on again. 3 times. I was still up reading. Each time I looked out. Each time, nothing. Just the yellow circle of light on the gravel, and beyond it, the cemetery. The second time it happened, I thought I saw something near the gate. A shape. But when I looked closer, there was nothing. Just the iron bars and the shadows from the oak trees. The third time, I went outside. I walked around the house, checked the garage, looked in the bed of my truck. Nothing. The wind had picked up. I could hear it moving through the cornfields behind the property. That rustling sound like dry paper. I stood there for a minute, listening. Then I heard something else. A voice, maybe. It was so faint, I couldn't be sure. Just a murmur on the wind. Could have been a car on the highway a mile away. Could have been anything. I went back inside. Locked the door. Jake was in his room with the door closed, probably asleep. I sat back down with my book, but I couldn't focus. The motion lights stayed off for the rest of the night. Monday at work. I asked my boss, Don, if he knew anything about Oak Grove. Dan's lived here his whole life. He squinted at me like he was trying to figure out why I was asking. What do you want to know about it for? Just curious, I said. I live across from it. My uncle's buried there. Died in '68. Car accident. He stacked a couple bags of seed, then stopped. Place is old. Real old. Some of those graves, they don't even know who's in them anymore. Records got lost in a flood back in the '40s. What kind of flood? I asked. The kind that washes away paper, he said. Why? You seen something over there? I almost told him about the gate, the flowers, the light. But it sounded stupid when I thought about saying it out loud. No, I said. Just wondered. He watched me for a second, then went back to work. But I could tell he was thinking about something. That week, the gate was closed 3 more times. Always at night. Always open again by morning. I started checking it, like a habit. I'd look out the window before bed, and there it would be, latched shut. In the morning, hanging open again. I never heard it move. Never heard the squeak of the hinge, which was weird because that hinge is loud. I've heard it when the wind blows. It's this high-pitched metal whine. But when it closed, if it was closing, there was no sound. Jake started noticing other things. He'd come home at 2, 3 in the morning, and he'd sit in his car for a minute before coming inside. One night he told me why. I keep thinking I see someone over there, he said. Standing by the graves? Just ... standing. Probably a deer, I said. Maybe, he said. But he didn't sound convinced. Deers move, though. This doesn't. It's just there. Then I blink and it's not. I asked him if it happened every night. Most nights, he said. I figured my eyes were just tired. You know, night shift messes with you. I knew what he meant. When I first moved back, I had trouble sleeping. Everything was too quiet. But you get used to it. Or you think you do. The flowers kept appearing. Not always in the same spot. Sometimes they'd be on a different grave. Always fresh. Always yellow mums. I started to wonder who was buying them. There are only a few houses out this way, and I knew all the neighbors. None of them seemed like the type to visit an old cemetery regularly. Mrs. Gable never went over there. The couple on the other side of us, the Whites, they were in their 80s and barely left their house. It didn't make sense. I mentioned it to Jake again. Someone's putting flowers out there, I said. Every week. Same kind? Maybe it's the city, he said. You know, maintenance or something. City doesn't maintain graves, I said. Just the grass, he shrugged. Maybe it's a church group. Maybe, I said. But there wasn't a church nearby. Not for miles. The first time I heard the name, it was a Wednesday. I'd gotten home late because Dan had me inventorying the back room. It was after 7 and dark. I was walking up to the house and I heard someone say Tom, clear as day. I turned around, but there was no one. Just the cemetery and the wind. I stood there for a minute, listening. Nothing. I figured it was the wind through the oak trees. They make sounds sometimes, especially in fall, when the leaves are dry. It can sound like a voice. Inside, Jake was already gone for his shift. The house was quiet. I made a sandwich and ate it standing up at the kitchen sink, looking out the window at the cemetery. The motion light came on. I watched it, waiting for it to go off. It stayed on for a full minute. Then it went dark. Then it came on again. Off. On. Off. Like someone was walking back and forth under it. Just at the edge of the sensor's range, I went outside. Hello? I called. Stupid, but I did it. No answer. I walked around the garage, looked down the road. Nothing. The light went off and stayed off. I stood there for a while, just listening. The cornfields were loud that night, the wind really moving through them. Then I heard it again. Tom, just a whisper. I told myself it was the wind. It had to be the wind. When I went back inside, I locked the door. I don't know why. I'd never locked it before, but I did. The next day at work, I was still thinking about it. Dan noticed I was distracted. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. Just didn't sleep great, he nodded. You know, my wife's cousin used to live out by Oak Grove back in the 80s. Said it was too quiet out there. What does that mean? I asked. Just what she said, Dan replied. Too quiet. Like the sound didn't carry right. I didn't know what to make of that. Sound carries fine out there. I can hear the highway at night when it's still. I can hear dogs barking from farms a mile away. It's not quiet. It's just, I don't know. Still. That weekend, I decided to do some yard work. The leaves were coming down, and Mrs. Gable had made a comment about them blowing into her yard. I was raking near the road when I saw a car pull up to the cemetery. It was an old Buick, beige, with one headlight out. It stopped at the gate, and a woman got out. She was older, maybe in her 60s, wearing a long coat. She walked into the cemetery, carrying something. Flowers, I figured. I kept raking, trying not to stare. She went to a grave near the back, one I couldn't see clearly from my yard. She was there for maybe 5 minutes. Then she walked back to her car and drove away. I made a note of the license plate just because... habit, I guess. I used to write down details for work orders. Old habit. I told Jake about it that night. So someone does visit, I said? One person, Jake said. In a year. Maybe there are others, I said. During the day when we're not here? Maybe, Jake said, but he didn't sound convinced. He was looking out the window, toward the cemetery. You ever wonder why the city even keeps that place up? I mean, no one goes there. Why not just let it go? Because it's a cemetery, I said. You can't just let it go, can't you? He said, if no one remembers who's there. I didn't have an answer for that. The following Tuesday, I got home, and the gate was closed again. But this time, there was something different. The old iron latch was hanging down like it had been used. I walked over to it. I don't know why. I guess I wanted to see if it actually worked. I lifted the latch. It moved, but it was stiff. I had to push down hard to get it to catch. When I did, it made this solid click. I left it like that, closed, latched. In the morning, it was open again. Not just open and latched, hanging at that same angle. I stood at the end of my driveway and looked at it for a long time. I couldn't figure out how it was happening. If someone was opening it, I would have heard it. That hinge is loud. If they were doing it at night, the motion light would catch them. But it hadn't, not once. I started paying more attention to the records thing Dan had mentioned. At the library in town, I looked up Oak Grove Cemetery. They had a file, but it was thin. Just a map, hand-drawn, and a list of names that was clearly incomplete. The librarian, a woman named Pat I'd known since high school, helped me find it. "We don't get many requests for this," she said. "Folks don't seem to care much about old cemeteries." "Dan said there was a flood," I said. "Lost the records." She nodded. "That was before my time. But yeah, I've heard that. Some of those graves, they only know who's there because of family stories. Nothing official." I asked her if there was a way to find out more. She thought about it. "You could try the courthouse. They might have death certificates. But for graves that old, probably not. People didn't always file those things properly, especially for kids." "Kids?" I said. "A lot of children's graves in old cemeteries," she said. "Infant mortality was high. They'd bury them, mark the spot, but sometimes the families couldn't afford a stone. Or the stone wore down. Over time, you just ... forget." I looked at the map she'd given me. It showed sections, but not all of them were labeled. There were blank spaces. "What about these?" I asked, pointing. She leaned over. "Probably empty plots. Or, lost." "Lost," I repeated. She shrugged. "It happens." That night, I sat on the porch with a beer and looked at those blank spaces on the map. I tried to match them up with what I could see from my yard. The cemetery isn't that big. You can walk across it in 2 minutes. But from where I sat, it looked bigger. The shadows from the oak trees made it seem deeper than it was. The motion light came on. I ignored it. It was doing that now. 3-4 times a night. I figured the sensor was just shot. I'd replace it when I got around to it. Jake got home around 2. I was still up, which wasn't like me. He climbed out of his car and stood there for a minute, looking toward the cemetery. Then he came inside. "Tom," he said, his voice low. "You awake?" "Yeah," I said. From the porch, he came to the door. "I saw someone over there again. It's probably that same woman," I said. "Maybe," Jake said. "But this was a man. Standing by the gate. He didn't move when I drove up. Just stood there." I got up and went inside. "What did he look like?" "I don't know. Dark clothes. Hard to see. But he was just ... waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked. Jake looked at me. "That's the thing. I don't think he was waiting for anything. I think he was just there." We stood in the kitchen for a minute, not saying anything. Then Jake went to his room. I locked the door again. I didn't know why. It was just a habit now. The next morning, I checked the gate. It was closed. Latched. I stood there for a long time, looking at it. Then I walked across the road and into the cemetery. I don't know what I was looking for. Footprints, maybe. But the ground was dry, hard-packed dirt, no prints. I went to the grave where I'd seen the woman place the flowers. There were no mums there now. The grave was bare. I walked to the back where the map had shown blank spaces. There were stones there, but they were flat, flush with the ground. Some of them had initials, but no dates. Some had nothing at all, just blank granite. I counted them. 12. 12 stones with no names. When I got home, Jake was still asleep. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking at the map. I tried to match the blank stones to the blank spaces. Some lined up, some didn't. It was like the map was from a different time, before some of the stones were added or removed. That afternoon, I saw Mrs. Gable in her yard. I went over. "Mrs. Gable," I said, "can I ask you something about the cemetery?" She kept watering her flowers. "You can ask." "Those blank stones in the back, do you know who they belong to?" She turned off the hose. "Probably no one," she said. "Or everyone. They used to do that, you know? When they didn't know who was where, just put a stone down. A marker. So you knew something was there, even if you didn't know what." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "Doesn't have to," she said. "It's just what they did." She went inside then, leaving the hose coiled on the ground. I picked it up for her, turned off the spigot. When I looked back at her house, she was watching me from the window. She didn't wave, just watched. That night, Jake and I were both home for once. He'd taken a night off. We were watching a movie, some action thing with a lot of explosions. About halfway through, the motion light came on. Then it went off. Then it came on again. Jake muted the TV. "You gonna fix that thing?" He asked. "Yeah," I said, but I didn't move. We just sat there, watching the light through the window. On, off, on, off. Like someone was pacing under it. "You ever think about moving?" Jake asked. "Why would I move?" I said, "I don't know," he said. "Just seems like a lot of ... activity. For a cemetery no one visits." Didn't answer. The light went off and stayed off. We finished the movie, but neither of us was really watching. The next day at work, Dan pulled me aside. "Tom, you look tired. Didn't sleep great," I said. "Still thinking about that cemetery?" I almost lied, but I didn't see the point. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I am." He leaned against the counter. "My wife's cousin, the one who lived out there. She moved after 6 months. Said she kept hearing someone call her name at night. Her name's Linda. She said it would just ... say it. Over and over. Probably the wind," I said. "Probably," Dan agreed, but he didn't sound convinced. "She said it knew her name, though. Not just any name. Her name." I didn't know what to say to that. I went back to unloading feed sacks, but I kept thinking about it. The voice I'd heard, it had said my name. I was sure of it, but I hadn't told anyone. So how would Dan know? When I got home, the gate was closed again. I didn't even look at it for long. I just went inside, made dinner, and tried to watch TV, but I couldn't concentrate. Around 8, there was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Gable. She never comes over. "Tom," she said, "can I borrow your phone?" "Mine's out." I let her in. She stood in the kitchen, not sitting down, while I got my phone. She dialed a number, waited, then hung up. "No answer," she said. "Who were you calling?" I asked. "My son," she said. "He checks on me, usually." She handed me back the phone. But when I looked at the call log, there was no outgoing call. She hadn't dialed anything. "You know," she said, standing by the door, "the sexton who used to take care of Oak Grove. He lived in your house. Back in the 70s, the sexton?" I said, "Caretaker," she explained. "He looked after the graves. Lived where you live now. Then one day, he just ... stopped. They found his car by the cemetery, but they never found him." I felt something cold run down my back. "What do you mean they never found him?" "Just what I said," Mrs. Gable replied. "He was there, then he wasn't. They searched the cemetery, the fields. Nothing. Like he walked into the ground." She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Probably just left town. People do that." She left then, closing the door behind her. I watched her walk back to her house. She didn't look back. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the sexton, about the gate, about the flowers. Around midnight, I got up and looked out the window. The motion light was on. I watched it, waiting for it to go off. It didn't, just stayed on. That bright LED glare lighting up the driveway, the road, the cemetery gate. The gate was closed. I could see it clearly, closed and latched. Then I saw the figure. It was standing just inside the gate, near the first row of graves. A man, I thought. Hard to tell. He was just a shape, dark against the stones. He wasn't moving. Just standing there, looking toward the house. Looking toward me, I stepped back from the window. My heart was pounding. I told myself it was Jake, playing a joke. But Jake was at work. I knew he was. I'd heard him leave. I looked again. The figure was still there, still not moving, and the motion light was still on. I grabbed my phone. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? There's a man in the cemetery? It's not illegal to be in a cemetery, even at night. It's public land. I thought about going out there, but I couldn't make myself do it. I just stood at the window, watching. After maybe 5 minutes, the figure moved. It walked not away, but deeper into the cemetery, between the rows of stones. I lost sight of it behind the oaks. Then the motion light went off. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. For what I don't know. For the light to come back on. For the figure to come back. For something to make sense. Nothing happened. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I realized I couldn't hear the cornfields. I couldn't hear the wind. I couldn't hear anything. It was like the sound had been turned off. Around 2, I heard Jake's car pull in. I watched him get out. He looked toward the cemetery, then at the house. He stood there for a minute, not moving. Then he came inside. He didn't say anything. He just went to his room and closed the door. The next morning, I went over to the cemetery. The gate was open. I walked through it, counting steps. I went to where I'd seen the figure standing. There were no footprints. The dirt was undisturbed. But on the nearest grave, the one with the worn stone, the one from 1873, there were fresh flowers. Yellow moms. I picked them up. The pot was still wet from the morning dew. I looked around. No one. Just the stones and the trees and the quiet. I took the flowers back to the house. I put them on the kitchen table. Jake came out of his room and saw them. Where'd those come from? He asked. The cemetery, I said. He looked at me. Why'd you bring them here? I don't know, I said. And I didn't. It just seemed like I should. Like they belonged here, not there. Jake didn't say anything else. He just looked at the flowers, then at me. Then he left for work. I sat there for a long time, looking at those moms. They were bright yellow, cheerful, completely out of place. I thought about throwing them out, but I couldn't. So I put them on the windowsill where they could get sun. They lasted for a week. Then they wilted. When they did, I threw them away. The next day, there were new ones on the same grave. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up at 2, 3 in the morning and look out the window. The motion light would be on. Sometimes the gate was closed. Sometimes it was open. Sometimes I saw the figure. Sometimes I didn't. But I always heard the voice. Just my name. Tom. Sometimes it sounded close, like it was right outside the window. Sometimes it sounded far away, like it was coming from the back of the cemetery. Once, I thought it came from inside the house, from Jake's room. But when I knocked on his door, he was asleep. Or pretending to be. I started keeping a notebook. I wrote down when the gate was closed, when the light came on, when I heard the voice. I wrote down the dates, the times. I tried to find a pattern. There wasn't one. Or if there was, it was too complicated for me to see. The only consistent thing was the flowers. Every week, like clockwork, yellow moms. Always on the same grave. Always fresh. I asked Mrs. Gable about the flowers. She was watering her plants again. Do you know who puts flowers on plot 12? I asked. She didn't look at me. Probably the same person who always has. Who's that? I asked. She turned off the hose. Someone who remembers, she said. Even when no one else does. I went to the library again. Pat helped me look through old newspapers. We found an article from 1978 about the sexton. His name was Thomas. Thomas Hartley. He'd disappeared on October 17th, 1978. They found his car parked by the cemetery, keys in the ignition. He was 52 years old. No family. No reason to leave, the article quoted a neighbor. He was a quiet man, kept to himself, but he took care of those graves like they were his own children. I asked Pat if she could find anything else. She looked, but there wasn't much. No follow-up articles. No discovery of a body. Just ... gone. I went home and looked at my lease. The landlord's name was Thomas Hartley, Jr., I called him. He answered on the third ring. "Mr. Hartley," I said. "This is Tom Miller. I rent your place on County Road D. Problem with the house?" He asked. He sounded distracted. "No," I said. "I just had a question. About the cemetery." There was a long pause. "What about it?" "I heard your father was the sexton there." Another pause. "That's right. Do you know what happened to him?" "He left," Mr. Hartley said. "Plain and simple. Got tired of this place and left. But they never found him. They didn't look hard," he said. "He was a grown man. He could leave if he wanted." I didn't believe him. I could hear it in his voice. He didn't believe it either. "Why do you keep the house?" I asked if you think he'd just left. "Because it's my house," he said. "And it's your house now. As long as you pay rent, what difference does it make?" He hung up then. I stood there with the phone in my hand, looking at the cemetery. The gate was closed. That night I stayed up. I sat in the dark living room, watching. The motion light came on at 11:47. I wrote it down. It went off at 11:48. Came on again at 11:49. I saw the figure. It was standing by the gate just like before. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. I don't know what I was thinking. I had to see. I walked across the road. The figure didn't move. It just stood there. As I got closer, I could see it more clearly. It was a man, wearing dark clothes, old-fashioned, like from a photograph. He was looking at the house, at my house. I stopped about 10 feet away. "Hello," I said. He didn't answer. He didn't move. I shone the flashlight on him. The beam went through him. It hit the gravestone behind him. There was no shadow, nothing. I stepped back. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The figure turned. Slowly it looked at me, and I recognized the face. It was the face from the newspaper photo. Thomas Hartley, the sexton, the man who'd disappeared. He opened his mouth. "Tom," he said. Not a whisper, not a voice on the wind. His voice, clear and quiet. I ran back across the road into the house. I locked the door. I locked all the doors. I sat in the kitchen with the lights on, waiting. The motion lights stayed on all night. I didn't look out the window. I couldn't. In the morning, Jake found me there. "You okay?" he asked. I told him what I'd seen. He didn't laugh. He didn't say it was my imagination. He just sat down across from me. "I've seen him too," he said. "I didn't want to tell you. I thought I was losing my mind." "What does he want?" I asked. "I don't know," Jake said. "But he's not just in the cemetery anymore." "What do you mean?" Jake pointed to the hallway. There were muddy footprints, leading from the front door to my bedroom, but they weren't our footprints. They were small, like a child's. I went to my room. On my pillow was a yellow mum, fresh. The window was open. I never opened that window. It's painted shut. I called Mr. Hartley again. He didn't answer. I drove to his office in town. He wasn't there. The woman at the desk said he'd gone out of town. "Family emergency," she said. "Won't be back for a while." I asked her where he lived. She wouldn't tell me. Privacy reasons. I went to the courthouse. I looked up the property records for my house. It had been owned by Thomas Hartley Sr. from 1965 to 1978, then by the city till 1980, then by Thomas Hartley Jr. ever since. The records were thin. Just deeds, no notes. No explanations. I went back to the library. Pat was there. She saw my face and asked what was wrong. I told her everything. The gate, the flowers, the figure, The voice. She listened. Then she went into the back and came out with a box. "These are the old cemetery records," she said. "The ones that survived the flood. They're not organized. I wasn't supposed to keep them, but..." She opened the box. Inside were papers, handwritten ledgers, notes. I started looking through them. Most were just names and dates. But in the back, there was a notebook. It was small, leather-bound. I opened it. It was a journal. Thomas Hartley's journal. The Sexton. The first entry was from 1975. "Started today," it read. "Mayor says the cemetery needs looking after. Too many graves going to ruin. Can't let that happen. Someone has to remember." I flipped through. Page after page of names. Descriptions of graves. Notes about families. Then, in 1977, the entries changed. "The gate keeps closing," he wrote. "I find it shut every morning. I know I leave it open. I always leave it open. But it's closed. And there are flowers. On the children's graves. I didn't put them there." I kept reading. October 10th, 1978. "Heard my name last night. Clear as day, Tom. That's my name. Why would someone be calling me? There's no one here." October 12th, 1978. "Saw a figure by the gate. Thought it was a vagrant. Went to chase him off. He wasn't there. But I saw his face. It was my face. He looked at me like he knew me. Like he'd been waiting." October 15th, 1978. "The house feels different. Colder. I hear footsteps in the hall. I'm the only one here, but I'm not. I know I'm not. They followed me home. From the graves, the ones no one remembers. They don't want to be forgotten, and they think I can remember them. But I can't. There are too many." The last entry was October 16th, 1978. "I'm going to leave the gate open tonight. All night. See what happens? Maybe they'll go home. Maybe they'll leave me alone. I just want to sleep." I closed the notebook. Pat was watching me. "What happened to him?" I asked. "No one knows," she said. "They found his car the next day. He was just ... gone." The gate was closed. I didn't open it. I went inside and locked the door. Jake was at work. I sat in the kitchen and looked at the notebook. Then I looked at the cemetery. The motion light came on. I saw the figure. Thomas Hartley. He was standing by the gate, but he wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at the graves. At the blank stones in the back, I understood then. He wasn't haunting the cemetery. He was haunted by it. And now, I was living in his house, sleeping where he slept, hearing what he heard, seeing what he saw. The voice came again. "Tom," not from outside. From the hallway. From Jake's room. But Jake wasn't home. He wouldn't be home for hours. I didn't answer. I sat there, in the kitchen, with the lights on, waiting. The footsteps started. Small ones. Coming from Jake's room, down the hall. They stopped outside my door. I could see the shadow under the doorframe, small, like a child's. The doorknob turned. I hadn't locked my bedroom door. I never did. It opened. There was no one there. Just a cold draft. And a smell. Dirt. Old dirt. Like a grave, I stayed in the kitchen all night. When Jake got home, he found me there. He didn't ask what happened. He just sat down. "I think we need to leave," he said. "Where would we go?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "But we can't stay here." But we did stay. Because the rent is cheap. Because it's hard to find a place that'll let you pay month to month. Because moving is expensive and we're both barely getting by. Because it's easier to pretend it's not happening than to admit that it is. The flowers keep coming. Every week. The gate still closes at night. The motion light still comes on. I still hear my name. Sometimes it's Thomas Hartley's voice. Sometimes it's a child's voice. Sometimes it's my own. I looked up my name in the notebook. Thomas Hartley had written it down. Tom Miller. Plot 89, died 1901. Age 8, but I'm not dead. I'm 34. I'm sitting in my kitchen writing this down. I'm alive, but the notebook doesn't lie. The dates are there, the names, the blank stones, the ones no one remembers. And I'm one of them now. Somehow, in some way, I don't understand. I still keep the porch light on, facing the stones. Not because I'm afraid of the dark, but because I'm afraid of what the dark forgets, and what it remembers, and what it thinks I should remember too. I still lock the front door. But I don't know who I'm trying to keep out anymore. And I'm starting to think it doesn't matter, because they're already inside. They've been inside. Since the day I moved in, since the day I said my name out loud and someone somewhere heard it and thought, oh, he remembers. I don't. But they think I do. And that's enough. That's always been enough. For them to call. For them to wait. For them to never, ever leave. The motion light just came on. It's 3 a.m. Jake's at work. I'm alone. But the footsteps in the hall tell me I'm not. They know my name. They know where I live. They know I'm the only one left who can hear them. And they won't let me forget. Even though I want to. Even though I try, I still keep the porch light on. I don't think I'll ever turn it off. Because when I do, I know what I'll see. Standing there. Waiting. The same thing Thomas Hartley saw. The same thing that made him leave his car keys in the ignition and walk into a place where the names are worn away and the grass grows over everything and no one remembers except the ones who can't forget. I still lock the door, but the lock is old and the key doesn't fit quite right. And sometimes, when I wake up in the night, I can smell dirt. And I know the gate isn't just closed. It's locked. From the inside, and I'm on the wrong side of it. Or the right side. I'm not sure anymore. The difference doesn't seem to matter. Not to them. Not to me. Not anymore. My name is Matt, and I'm from Millersburg, Pennsylvania. I moved into the old Foster place about 2 years ago. It's a 2-story house that needs paint, sits on a 1/4 acre, and happens to be right across the street from St. Mark's Cemetery. Not a big deal, really. You get used to it. The rent was cheap, and Jake, my roommate, thought it was funny. He'd do this thing where he'd wave at the gravestones from the porch and say, "Quiet neighbors, at least." Jake works over at the distribution center off Route 11. Comes home smelling like cardboard and diesel. I work at the hardware store downtown, the one next to the post office. We've known each other since high school, so splitting the rent just made sense. The cemetery doesn't bother me. Grew up around here, so you see them everywhere. Little patches of land with old iron fences. Tucked between houses or behind the grocery store. St. Mark's is small. Maybe 200 headstones, most of them from the 1800s. The town keeps the grass cut. But the place is still wild around the edges. There's a big oak in the back that drops acorns on the slate stones. In the fall, it sounds like rain. You can hear it at night if the windows are open. My routine is pretty simple. I open the store at 7, which means I'm up at 6, out the door by 1:45. Coffee from the Sheets on Market Street. Sometimes I see the same people every morning, Mrs. Gable in her Buick, Old Man Kowalski, walking his beagle. You nod, they nod back. That's Millersburg. The store stays busy enough. We sell a lot of paint to people fixing up their porches, a lot of plumbing parts for old houses like mine. I eat lunch at my desk, usually a sandwich from home. Jake's got the evenings, so he's home by 4, napping on the couch by 5. We're both quiet people, which works out. The house has a front porch that sags a little in the middle. I keep meaning to fix it, but you know how it is. There's a wicker chair out there that came with the place. I sit in it sometimes after work, just to watch the light fade. The cemetery across the street gets this golden glow around 6:30, 7 o'clock. The stones catch the sun and turn warm. It's actually kind of nice. Peaceful. You can hear the traffic from 147, but it's distant, just a hum. Closer, there's the wind in the trees, the occasional dog barking from the houses on either side. Our neighbor to the left, Mrs. Henley, has 3 cats that prowl along the fence line. She's lived here 40 years. Says the cemetery never bothered her none. Jake likes to grill on the weekends. We'll eat on the porch, looking out at the stones. He makes the same joke every time. Hope we're not disturbing the residents. Usually just shake my head, tell him to pass the ketchup. It's not that I'm disrespectful. It just feels like part of the landscape, like the hill behind the house or the creek that runs through the park. You don't think about it. It's just there. The town itself is old. Founded in 1820, they say. There's a historical marker on Main Street by the old hotel that's now a law office. We've got one traffic light, 2 pizza places, and a library that's only open 3 days a week. People stick around. My boss at the store, Frank, his dad owned it before him. Mrs. Henley next door, she was born in her house. You get these deep roots. Sometimes it feels like the whole town is just holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. But nothing ever does. That's the appeal, I guess. I'm not a superstitious person. Never have been. My mom was a little she'd throw salt over her shoulder, wouldn't walk under ladders. But Dad was practical. He fixed engines for a living. He taught me that things have reasons. A noise is a loose pipe. A shadow is a tree branch. So when little things started happening across the street, I didn't jump to conclusions. I still don't, really. I'm just telling you what I noticed. First thing was the gate. There's a wrought iron gate at the entrance of St. Mark's. Not that it closes or anything. It's just ornamental, attached to stone pillars. One morning in March, I noticed it was swung open wide. Not a big deal wind, probably. We get these gusts coming down the valley. But it was weird because I couldn't remember seeing it open like that before. It's usually just sitting there, half closed, rusted in place. I mentioned it to Jake. He shrugged, said maybe the groundskeeper was working. Except I don't think there is a groundskeeper, not really. The town sends a crew once a month. I didn't think about it again until I saw the flowers. There's a section of graves in the back, the oldest ones, where the stones are so worn you can't read the names. One Tuesday after work, I noticed fresh flowers on one of them. White carnations, tied with a ribbon. Looked brand new. I figured maybe a descendant came, by happen sometimes, people tracing their family trees. But the next day, there were flowers on a different grave. Then another. Every day that week, a new grave had fresh flowers. I mentioned it to Mrs. Henley when I saw her getting her mail. She squinted across the street and said, "Huh, that's nice." Someone's being thoughtful. It didn't seem odd to her. The motion light on our porch started acting up around then too. It's one of those sensor ones, supposed to turn on when something moves within 10 feet. It would flick on at weird times, 2 in the morning, 3. I'd be in bed, hear the click, see the glow through the blinds. I'd get up, look out. Nothing there. Jake said it was probably deer. We get them sometimes, crossing from the woods behind the cemetery. But I looked. No deer, no shadows. Just the stones lit up by our light, looking pale and still. One night I could have sworn I heard voices. It was warm windows open, and I was reading in the living room. Just a murmur, like someone talking low. I muted the TV, listened. Nothing. Then it came again, kind of a whisper, like wind through leaves. But it was coming from outside, across the street. I went to the window, pushed the curtain aside. The cemetery was dark, just the shapes of the stones. The wind was blowing, sure. But this was different. It had a rhythm, almost like words. I told myself it was nothing. Sound carries weird here. The houses are close, but not that close. Maybe someone was walking their dog on the next street over. Maybe it was Mrs. Henley's cats fighting. There's always a reason. Jake started noticing things too, though. He'd come home from his shift, park in the gravel driveway, and say the street felt off. I asked him what he meant. He couldn't really say. Just quiet, he said. Too quiet. I told him that was a cliche, and he laughed. Said I was right. But he started parking closer to the house, leaving his headlights on until he got to the door. The town records are kept in the basement of the municipal building, next to the fire station. I went down there one Saturday to look up something about my house, wanted to see when the plumbing was last updated. The clerk, a guy named Paul, who's about my age, helped me find the roll books. While I was there, I asked about St. Mark's, just curious. He got quiet, which I noticed. He said the records were incomplete, lost in a flood back in the 70s. I asked if he knew who might be leaving flowers. He said he didn't know, didn't want to guess. Then he changed the subject, asked if I needed anything else. It was a small reaction, but it stuck with me. Paul's not a talkative guy, but he's not rude either. That was rude, kinda. I started walking through the cemetery on Sundays. Just a loop from the gate to the back and out again. It's a nice walk. The stones have stories you can piece together. Whole families buried together. Infants. Young men who died in 1863, probably in the war. You see the same last name over and over, generation after generation. I'd stop at the graves with the fresh flowers, try to read the inscriptions. Most were faded. But one had a name I could make out. Samuel Hart. 1841, 1901. The flowers there were yellow roses, still in the plastic wrapper from the grocery store. I looked him up later, found a Samuel Hart who'd owned a farm where the high school is now. No living relatives that I could find. The motion light kept triggering. I adjusted the sensor, thinking maybe it was catching the heat from the house or a reflection. Didn't help. Jake offered to disconnect it, but I said no, it's fine. It's just doing its job. But I started sleeping lighter, waking up when that click sounded. I'd lie in bed, listening. Sometimes I'd hear gravel crunching, like footsteps on the path that runs through the cemetery. Sometimes I'd hear nothing at all. In April, the weather turned warm and sticky. The bugs came out. You could hear them at night, a constant hum. But one night the hum just stopped. I was on the porch, rocking in that wicker chair, and the sound cut out like someone flipped a switch. It was dead silent. Not even the traffic from 147. I sat there, feeling the stillness. Then I heard a name. Clear as day. Matthew. Just once. I stood up, looked around. No one there. The street was empty. I told myself it was a radio, a neighbor's TV through an open window. But it was my name. I didn't tell Jake. He'd just make a joke, or worse, he'd get spooked and want to move. I couldn't afford the rent on my own, so I kept it to myself, started making excuses to stay inside after dark. I'd close the curtains earlier, lock the doors. The house is old, the locks are old. The back door doesn't latch quite right unless you push your hip into it. I started checking it twice before bed. The flowers kept appearing. I tried to catch who was leaving them. I'd come home early, park down the street, watch from the car. Nothing. No cars, no people. Just the stones, the grass, the wind. Then I'd go inside, and when I looked out later, there'd be a new bouquet. It was like they knew I was watching. I asked Paul at the municipal building again, casual this time. Any idea who's been tending the old graves? He looked at me, then looked away. Said some things don't need tending. They just need remembering. That was it. He walked off to file something. I stood there, holding my copied permit, feeling like I'd said something wrong. Jake's shift changed in May. He started working nights. So I had the house to myself in the evenings. It was quieter. Too quiet. I'd make dinner. Watch TV. Try to ignore the way the light from the cemetery seemed brighter somehow. Like the stones were reflecting something that wasn't there. The motion light clicked on and off, on and off. I stopped looking out. One night I came home from the store and found muddy footprints on the porch. Not big, just ... prints. Like someone had walked up the steps, stood at the door, then walked back down. They were dry by then, just outlines in the dust. I checked the lock. It was fine. I figured it was Jake, maybe coming home early and forgetting to wipe his boots. But Jake wears work boots, big ones. These were smaller, like dress shoes. I almost called him, but he was at work. I didn't want to bother him. I swept the porch, erased the prints. The next day, they were back. Same spot, same size. I sat in the wicker chair looking at them, trying to think of a rational explanation. Delivery guy? Mrs. Henley's cats? No, the prints were too defined. Too human. I left them there that time just to see. They stayed for 3 days, unchanged. Then on the 4th day, they were gone. Not swept away, just gone. Like they'd never been there. The whispering got more frequent. I'd be in bed and I'd hear it low and steady, coming from outside. Not wind. Wind doesn't have a rhythm. This was like someone reciting something, a list, a prayer. I could almost make out words, names, dates. I put in earplugs. It helped, but I could still feel the vibration, like it was coming through the walls. I started dreaming about the cemetery. Not nightmares, just .uts. Dreams where I was walking through it, but the stones were all blank. No names. And I'd hear someone behind me, footsteps matching mine. I'd turn, and there'd be no one. Just the path stretching back, empty. I'd wake up, and the motion light would be on. In June, I took a day off work to paint the bathroom. It's this ugly yellow has been since we moved in. I was up on a ladder, cutting in the ceiling, when I heard a knock. Not on the door, on the window. The bathroom window faces the cemetery. It's frosted glass, so you can't see out. But I heard it. 3 taps. I climbed down, went outside, walked around the house. Nothing. No one. The window was clean. No marks. I went back inside, and there was a handprint on the glass. From the inside, small, like the footprints. I touched it. It was cold, I told Jake that night. He was eating cereal at midnight, still in his work clothes. I said, "I think someone's messing with us." He looked at me, and I could tell he didn't think it was a person. "Maybe it's kids," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Kids from the high school playing pranks." I nodded, said, "Yeah, probably. But the high school is 2 miles away, and there's nothing here to prank. Just an old house and some old graves. The neighbor on the other side, Mr. Davies, is older. He's lived here since the 70s. I saw him watering his garden one morning, and I asked him about the cemetery. Just casual. You ever notice anything weird over there?" He turned off his hose, looked at me for a long time. "Them graves aren't what you think they are," he said. Then he went inside. Didn't say another word. I started researching the cemetery. Online, local history groups. Found a post from 2008, someone asking about unmarked graves. A commenter said St. Mark's had a section for unknown residents, people who died without family. The town buried them, but the records were lost. I asked Paul about it. He said, "We don't discuss that." I pressed a little, asked why not. He looked at me and said, "Because they're not unknown to everyone, Matt." That gave me a chill. I went home, sat on the porch, watched the sun go down. The motion light clicked on. I didn't look. I just sat there, listening. The whispering started. This time I could make out a word. Stay. Just that. Stay. Over and over. I got up, went inside, locked the door. The light stayed on all night. Jake found me the next morning, asleep on the couch. He said I looked like hell. I told him I hadn't slept well. He said, maybe we should talk to someone. The landlord, or I don't know. I asked him if he'd heard anything. He shook his head. I just feel it, he said. Like something's waiting. I went to work, but I couldn't concentrate. Frank asked if I was okay. I said, yeah, just tired. He looked at me like he didn't believe me. That afternoon, a customer came in, an older woman I didn't recognize. She was buying gloves, the thick rubber kind. She looked at me and said, "You live across from St. Mark's, don't you?" I said, yeah. She nodded, like that explained something. My grandmother's there. She says it's nice. Quiet. Then she left. I stood there, holding the gloves, wondering what she meant by says. The footprints started appearing inside. Just 1 or 2 by the front door, like someone had stepped in and stopped. They were dry, dusty. I'd sweep them up, and they'd be back the next day. I tried to tell myself it was me, tracking something in, but I take my boots off at the door. Jake does too. We're careful about that, with the old floors. I started checking the cemetery records again. This time I looked for names I recognized. There's a Hart family buried there, like I said. And a Miller. And a Foster, the family that owned our house. I found a map in the town archives, a photocopy of an old drawing. It showed the cemetery, the streets, the houses. Our house was marked, but there was a note in the margin I hadn't seen before. Property line includes burial easement. I asked Paul what that meant. He said, it means the dead have a right of way. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up, listening. The motion light clicked on at 2, off at 2:05. On again at 3:10. Off at 3:11. At 4:30, I heard the whispering. This time, it was right outside the window. I got up, looked out. The cemetery was dark, but there was a shape near the gate, small, like a person, but not moving. I watched it for 10 minutes. It didn't move. I went back to bed, pulled the covers over my head. The whispering stopped. The next day I called in sick. I sat on the porch, waiting. I don't know what for. Mrs. Henley came over with a casserole. She does that sometimes when she thinks we're looking thin. She sat with me a while, not saying much. Then she said, you know, my Tom's buried over there. He died in '89. I still talk to him. I asked if he ever talks back. She smiled, a little sad. Not in words. I didn't know what to say to that. She left, and I sat there, thinking about Tom. I looked up his grave later. Thomas Henley, 1945 to 1989. The stone was clean, well kept. No flowers, though. I thought about leaving some, but that felt weird. Jake came home that night, and I could tell something was wrong. He sat down, didn't turn on the TV. He just looked at me. I saw someone, he said. In the cemetery. When I pulled in, I asked what they looked like. He shook his head. I don't know. Small. Like a kid. But they weren't moving right. It was like they were ... floating. He laughed, but it was nervous. I mean, not floating, just ... gliding. You know? I didn't know, but I believed him. We sat there in silence. The motion light clicked on. Neither of us looked. The next morning, I found a flower on my porch. A white carnation, the same kind from the graves. It was lying by the door, perfectly placed. I picked it up. It was fresh. I looked across the street. The graves I'd been watching were empty now. No flowers. I kept the carnation. Put it in a glass of water. It lasted a week, then wilted. I threw it out. The next day, another one appeared. This time, yellow roses. I tried to talk to Paul again. He saw me coming, actually turned and walked the other way. I caught up to him in the parking lot. Paul, I said, I need to know what's going on. He stopped aside. Matt, some people ask questions they don't want answered. I told him I was asking anyway. He looked at me and his face was tired. St. Mark's isn't a regular cemetery. It never was. It was a potter's field. For people who had nowhere else, the town didn't want them buried in the churchyard, so they put them across from the empty lots. Out of sight. But there are names, I said. Headstones. Those came later, he said. The town felt guilty. Put up markers. But the names are borrowed from other cemeteries. From records that were already lost? They're placeholders. I felt cold. So who's buried there? People, he said. Just people. But they've been alone a long time. I went home, looked up Potter's Field. It's a term for a burial place for unknown or indigent people. I thought about the footprints, the whispering, the flowers. That night, I heard my name again. Matthew. Clear, not a whisper. A voice right outside the door. I got up, looked through the peephole. The porch was empty. The motion light was on. I opened the door. There was a footprint, fresh in the damp from the night air. Just one, like someone had stood there, called my name, and left. I stepped outside. The cemetery was dark, but I could see movement near the back by the old oak. A shape. Small. It raised a hand. Waved. I waved back before I could think. Then it was gone. I closed the door, locked it, checked it twice. Jake came home early the next morning, said he'd quit his job. Just like that? Said he couldn't do nights anymore, couldn't drive past the cemetery in the dark. He was packing his stuff before I could even process it. It's not just the shape, he said. It's the feeling. Like they're waiting for me to stop. Like they want to talk. I didn't try to stop him. I helped him load his car. He left his key on the kitchen counter. You should leave too, he said. I told him I couldn't afford it. He said, can you afford to stay? I watched him drive off. The street was quiet. The motion light clicked on. That afternoon, I went to the cemetery. I walked straight to the back, to the grave with the yellow roses. The inscription was clearer now, like it had been cleaned. Samuel Hart, 1841 to 1901. I knelt down, touched the stone. It was warm. The ground beneath it felt soft, like it had been turned recently. I stood up, and I heard the whispering. This time I understood it. It was a list. Names, dates. Mine was in there. I went back to the house, got my laptop. I looked up the property records for my address. The Foster Place. Built in 1880, owned by the Foster family until 1950. Then the town, then a series of renters. Me. I found an old newspaper article from 1902. Local man Samuel Hart found dead on his property. Property was listed as the lot across from St. Mark's. But the lot across from St. Mark's is my house. I looked at the map again, the property line, the burial easement. I went to the basement. Its dirt floor, stone walls. I'd only been down there a few times to check the water heater. I brought a flashlight. In the corner, under some old shelves, I found a stone. Small, flat, like a headstone. No inscription. Just a marker. I dug around it with my hands. The dirt came up easy. 6 inches down, I hit wood. I stopped. Covered it back up. Went upstairs. Washed my hands. The water ran brown. That night, I sat on the porch. The motion light was off. I hadn't heard it click in hours. The cemetery was dark. No shapes, no whispers. Just the wind. I sat there until the sun came up. The light hit the stones, and I could see them clearly. All of them. And I understood. They weren't looking at the street. They were looking at the house. I still live here. I can't afford to leave. I keep the porch light on, facing the stones. I don't hear whispering anymore. I don't see shapes. But sometimes when the wind is right, I hear a knock on the window. The bathroom window? 3 taps. And I know it's not for me. It's for the house. Because the house was here first. And the dead remember who lived here. I still leave flowers on the graves. White carnations. Yellow roses. I don't know who they're for, but they always disappear by morning. And the footprints keep appearing. Inside now. Not by the door. In the hallway, leading to the basement. I sweep them up. They come back. I don't follow them anymore. I just sweep. Mrs. Henley came by yesterday. She said Tom told her to check on me. I asked how Tom was doing. She said he's glad you're staying. Says it's nice to have company. I don't look across the street at night. I keep the curtains drawn. The motion light burned out last week. I haven't replaced it. It's better dark. Sometimes I hear my name, not whispered. Just spoken like someone's reminding themselves who I am. It comes from the basement. I don't go down there. I just listen, and I wait. The final line isn't about ghosts. It's about belonging. About how some places claim you. How some graves aren't about death. They're about waiting. And I'm still here. So I guess I'm waiting too. I still keep the porch light on, facing the stones. Not every burial is about death.